Welcome back. As world leaders meet in the Swiss ski resort Davos, the attention of the public is yet again on the financial industry. While last year's meeting saw a considerable amount of banker bashing, this year there's a more conciliatory tone between bankers and regulators. So are more regulations of banks necessary to prevent another period of financial intricacies? And what sort of regulations do UAE banks still face? Well, to discuss this, we are now joined by Robin Amlot, Managing Editor of CPI Financial. Hi, good to have you here, Robin. Tell us, in Davos, the world elite is meeting at the moment. Many CEOs of banks say that their banks are safer, that the whole financial system is safer. They're also saying that if you have too much regulation, that could cause a new financial crisis. Do you agree?
Well, that's three different questions, and the answer to each one is different. So I'm going to take them in reverse order, if I may. Is the new set of regulation going to cause the next crisis? Well, one of the problems that we always have whenever there's any crisis, and this actually doesn't matter whether it's in the financial system, or whether it's in business, or whether it's even a war, people always end up planning for the last one. They plan for the last crisis. They address the problems raised by the last crisis. They don't necessarily think forward to what might be the next crisis and plan for that. So it is possible that the regulations that are being put in place now, while they might stave off a repeat of the crisis we've just gone through, they won't necessarily be the right set of regulations to solve a future crisis. So that's a maybe on that one. Is the whole financial system safer? The answer is no. Actually, it's not, because there are some things that have not yet been addressed in terms, and this feeds back into what I've just said about the next crisis. And trust me, there will be a next crisis. I can't tell you exactly when it'll be, where it'll come from, but the one thing you can guarantee with capitalism is there will be one at some point. It's creative destruction. That's what capitalism is. So is the whole financial system safer? Not necessarily, because there are things that have not yet been addressed.
Which would be?
Derivatives risk has still not been addressed. There is a massive amount of derivatives risk out there being managed by the hedge fund managers at the moment, and some of them are making huge amounts of money at the moment. It's been a very profitable year, in fact, 2010, to be in the hedge fund business. That doesn't mean they've got it under control. I think one or two of them are riding the tiger. Taking your first question last, are banks themselves safer? A lot of individual banks are safer, yes, and they're safer because of changes that have happened already in terms of capital that's been injected into them, equity stakes that have been taken in them, changes in the way they're doing business. So it's a no, maybe, yes, in that order.
Okay. You just talked about banks. Let's look at the UAE banks. Now, we've seen some tighter regulation from the central bank here in the UAE. What do you think? How much more will the UAE central bank impose on the banks here in the region, looking at Basel III regulations that the industry wants to implement?
I'm going to pick up right there. I wouldn't say the industry necessarily wants to implement all the regulations in Basel III, because, of course, we just touched on that in answering the first question. But what is happening is that this set of regulations is being discussed, being put forward by the regulators in the Bank for International Settlements and the Basel Committee. What I can tell you is that some of it isn't going to mean very much here, and that's quite simply because if you look at the banks in the UAE, most of them have, courtesy to some extent of the government, whether it's the government of Dubai or the government of Abu Dhabi, quite strong capital bases at the moment. Their capital adequacy ratios are running around, on average, 20%. Now, when you consider that Basel III is going to be asking people for 12% capital adequacy ratio, we have comfortable headroom as far as the banks here are concerned. There are other issues, though, that have yet to be addressed here in terms of...
Which would that be?
Credit risk management, and those things, I think, are coming, because while, if you look at the round of results we've got coming out from the banks now, the full year 2010 results, we're seeing some very good results from some banks, and we're seeing some encouraging results from others, but there are problems still to be addressed in terms of debt management. The thing is that banks are in business to lend, and a lot of them haven't been.
It's picking up, though, at the moment, and that brings me to my next question. Do you have the feeling, also with the look at the Q4 numbers and the full year results 2010, are banks out of the woods yet?
Again, two different things. Are they out of the woods yet? Some of them are, some of them aren't. Some of them still have issues to address. Things are picking up, though. As I just said, banks are in business to lend. You can't be a banker and not lend. That's not how it works, because that's how you make your money, is by charging people for lending the money. Whether you call it interest charging if you're a conventional institution, or whether it's cost plus as a murabaha or a profit rate if you're an Islamic institution, a bank is in business to move money around. And what was happening, certainly for most of the first 3 quarters of last year, is the money wasn't moving. We are starting to see more activity there, and that's good news for the economy as a whole, of course, because it means business can borrow money, business can invest, trade can grow, and that's what the economy here needs.
Let's look at Egypt. We had riots going on for a couple of days now. How much are UAE banks affected by those riots? How does it affect their business?
Well, the first way it affects business in the whole region, of course, is that it actually makes things more expensive, because and look at what's happened in the stock markets around the region. They've all reacted badly to what's going on in Egypt. And what that means, of course, is that it's more difficult for me to go to a bank and borrow money against a valuation of my business, because the valuation of my business has just gone down. So it does make it more difficult for business in general. Obviously, dislocation in Egypt means it's pretty much impossible to do any business in Egypt at the moment with the banks there closed. So you can't do any interbank business, and if you have exposure there to businesses there, you're going to have difficulty getting the money in and out. So it is having an effect, and the concern is how much longer this is going to go on for.
Thank you very much for these insights, Robin. See you soon. Well, that's it from the business desk. You can contact us at news@city7tv.com. Up next, Laura Buckwell is back with the news.